Sign these papers today, or the bank takes your farm tomorrow. That's what the HOA president told me right there in my kitchen, standing at the very table my great-grandfather built with his bare hands back in 1899. Vivian Hartwell, the queen of the cul-de-sac, all sharp lines and sharper smiles, just pushed a foreclosure notice across the table like she was handing out Halloween candy. This land is worth millions now, Mr. Blackstone. Time to move on. She didn't even wait for my reply, just strutted out to her Mercedes heels, clicking on the old floor, already tasting victory. Now I know what you're probably thinking, another story about some poor old farmer getting steamrolled by the HOA, not quite. See, I wasn't always a chicken-chasing, dirt-under-the-nails retiree. 20 years ago, I was making regional banks richer than their wildest dreams. I ran with the wolves on Wall Street, specialized in community banking buyouts, turned failing banks into gold mines. Then in 2008, when Regional Trust Bank was bleeding cash like a stuck pig, I quietly scooped up controlling interest for about what you'd spend on a used minivan. And the best part, nobody ever found out it was me. Let the board think it was some shadowy New York investment group, I figured. I just wanted peace and quiet on my grandfather's 40-acre farm. Picture it, heritage chickens wandering through rows of heirloom tomatoes. The sunrise crow of roosters blending with the distant whir of suburban lawnmowers. I traded heart-stopping mortgage deals for the sweet ache of pulling carrots from soil that had fed my family since before Model Ts roamed these roads. Life was so perfect, I almost forgot people like Vivian existed. But then she happened, Vivian Hartwell. She built her own little empire, 180 houses all under her iron fist. Hartwell Meadows, a suburban fortress, wrapped all the way around my old farm. She'd tried buying me out a few times, waving checks big enough to make most people forget their last name. But my great-grandfather's will. No developers, ever. The old man had a sixth sense for this kind of trouble. Vivian, though she was relentless, 47 sharp as a broken bottle, ruthless as tax season. She lived in a McMansion straight out of a magazine, but every morning she had to stare down at my weathered farmhouse. I'll bet the honest scent of chicken manure floating over her million-dollar roses made her rethink all her life choices. See, my stubborn little farm was her developer nightmare. Her new roads had to snake around my boundaries. Buyers griped about the smells, the smell of actual food being grown, not whatever they pipe into supermarkets. But I remembered from my Wall Street days properties that existed before zoning laws can't be forced into HOA rules. Legal history trumps suburban fantasy, doesn't matter how many lawyers the HOA hires. Vivian didn't care. She marched across my porch last month, heels stabbing holes in my granddad's wood-waving legal papers and declaring war. We've discovered serious irregularities in your property obligations, Mr. Blackstone. That smile could freeze boiling water. According to her, I owed $12,000 in back HOA fees, plus $50,000 in penalties for breaking rules my land never signed up for. The paperwork looked official, all stamps and signatures enough to scare most folks into handing over the deed. But here's the kicker. She convinced Regional Trust Bank, my own bank, mind you, that my farm was suddenly under HOA jurisdiction thanks to some boundary revision from 2010. And my own employees, none of them knowing I signed their paychecks, were feeding her foreclosure procedures and inside dirt. She'd weaponized my own institution against me. And then, like some suburban general, she slid those foreclosure papers across my table thinking she just won. What she didn't realize, she'd declared war on the person holding all the strings. The next morning, I strolled into Regional Trust Bank, not as the owner, not yet. Just a puzzled farmer trying to figure out why his chickens were about to be evicted. The lobby still smelled of polished marble and nervous dreams. Janet Morrison, the loan officer, nearly spilled her coffee when she saw me. "Thank goodness you're here. We need to discuss some account irregularities." I took a seat, easy as you please, watching her hands shake like autumn leaves. "Janet, my family's had that land since before subdivision was even a word. How do I owe fees to an HOA that didn't exist when Granddad built his chicken coop?" She started to explain, but all I heard was Miss Hartwell. Comprehensive documentation, legitimate boundary revision. Everything's above board. Now, banks aren't supposed to just take someone's word on debts. That's how you end up on the wrong end of a federal investigation. Interesting. Mind if I see those documents? Janet turned ghost white. They're in Miss Hartwell's secure file system. She has all the originals. That afternoon, I called in a few old friends, folks who know how to dig through creative accounting. What we found, Vivian had been running a circus of fraud across the whole subdivision, making up property values, backdating documents, you name it. Her company was borrowing against imaginary numbers. Every loan was a federal crime waiting to happen, and every single one carried her personal guarantee, her mansion, her cars, her jewelry, all pledged as collateral for debts she'd never pay. She wasn't trying to steal my farm for the land. She was drowning in her own debts, desperate for anything to keep her afloat. But she wasn't done. Vivian fired up a campaign to scare the neighborhood, painting me as some financial plague. Friends and neighbors, she'd say at her wine and cheese meetings, were facing a crisis. People freaked. Mrs. Patterson burst into tears about mortgages others stopped waiving when I drove past. Then came my twist. Mrs. Kowalski, 78, depression survivor, showed up on my porch, clutching photos and a formal document. She offered to pay my HOA dues for 2 years if I'd sign this. Say your chickens are making people sick. 2 years fees for one little lie. That's when I realized Vivian just handed me the last piece. She'd moved from fraud to outright bribery of seniors. Next morning, I walked into the regional trust boardroom with a briefcase full of evidence. The air in there felt like the inside of a microwave, everyone sweating, no one talking. I spread out documents like a blackjack dealer, fraudulent appraisals, shell company, money trails, emails. Gentlemen, let's discuss your foreclosure practices and why you're trying to take property for debts that don't exist. Their faces dropped. We relied on comprehensive documentation from Ms. Hartwell. Janet whispered. I opened the folder with the best part: every illegal loan, every falsified signature, all tied to one woman, Vivian Hartwell. You're going to drop this foreclosure and maybe, just maybe, you'll keep your jobs. But Vivian wasn't done yet. 2 days later, Mrs. Kowalski showed up shaking, holding her own foreclosure notice, 15 years never late, and suddenly she's about to lose her home. Retaliation for refusing to lie. I went deep into the bank's archives that night, and the dirt kept piling up: emails, cash deposits, even a recorded call where Vivian discussed compensation for looking the other way. The real shock: her development company was secretly controlled by her ex-husband's bankruptcy attorney, who'd helped her hide millions in the divorce. This was organized crime, not just fraud. I called the FDIC fraud unit. Within 24 hours, federal investigators descended on regional trust like ants on a picnic. Vivian started sweating. The feds moved through her records like surgeons, and I watched from my kitchen with a mug that had been in the family for 40 years. Fourth day, I got the call: Patricia Harris, senior examiner. Mr. Blackstone, what we found is spectacular. This will be taught in federal law enforcement for years. $47 million in fraudulent lending, all tied to Vivian, who'd personally guaranteed more debt than she was worth by $8 million. But the twist: she'd been liquidating assets, transferring millions offshore. If she vanished, the neighborhood lost everything. But I still owned the bank. I called up, froze every account with her name on it. When Patricia realized who I was, her jaw just about hit the table. You own the bank, she whispered, like she'd just discovered Superman was real and raising chickens in her county. The war council gathered in my barn that night: Mrs. Kowalski, Dimitri with his folder of construction violations, Sarah with a resident petition. We plotted a community counterattack, county inspection, emergency HOA meeting, public financial disclosure. I'd reveal my ownership, trigger default on her personal guarantees, and with her accounts frozen and feds closing in, Vivian would have nowhere left to run. But bullies never go quietly. As the community packed the meeting hall, news vans and federal agents rolling in, I got a call. Vivian was loading boxes into a moving truck, midnight, fleeing with evidence, computer drives, HOA records. I showed up just in time. She threatened me, then waved a USB drive in the air. This has every resident's info. One wrong move and I upload it everywhere. But she was plugged into my bank's network, the one I controlled. I locked her out in real time, watched her face go from smug to terrified. Federal agents moved in, but she slipped out the back, escaped in a car registered under a shell company. She left behind boxes of evidence, but also managed to flee with millions. Days passed. News broke Vivian had made it to the Caymans, then Costa Rica, living under a fake name, FBI on her trail. Panic swept through the subdivision, for sale signs everywhere, families terrified their equity was gone, their community ruined. That's when I called the emergency meeting. Your homes are safe. As the bank's owner, I'm guaranteeing every mortgage here. Vivian can't hurt you anymore. The relief was palpable. Neighbors started helping each other. Mrs. Kowalski was elected HOA president. Dmitri organized repairs. Sarah set up financial oversight. For the first time, the place felt like a real community, not a collection of strangers. 3 weeks later, the call came. Costa Rican authorities caught Vivian at a luxury resort. Extradited in cuffs, Perp walked through the courthouse in front of every neighbor she'd threatened. At the final meeting, the U.S. attorney laid it out: $1.2 million stolen from the HOA, $47 million in fake loans, hundreds of families' personal info for sale. But every penny was recovered, plus interest. The room erupted: relief, vindication, justice. I stepped up, told the whole story. 4 months ago, Vivian tried to steal my farm. She didn't know she was threatening the guy who owned every mortgage in this place. But the real victory is what you all did: stood up, fought back, rebuilt this community. Months passed. The mansion became a garden. Restitution funded scholarships, repairs, and new community traditions. Neighbors who'd never spoken became friends. National news called us a model for HOA reform. Maybe the best revenge isn't just beating the bad guys, it's building something so good their memory fades into the dust. And the moral? Sometimes the universe lets you be both the underdog and the kingmaker. It's not about winning one fight, it's about reminding people that power means nothing without trust. That's what will last longer than any headline, any lawsuit, any fleeting taste of revenge. So here's my question for you. Where do you draw the line between defending what's yours and fighting for everyone around you? Is justice about punishment or about what you build after the dust settles? Drop your thoughts below, and hey, if you've ever stared down a bully or watched karma do its thing, I want to hear your story. This isn't just my fight, it's every community's.